We were supposed to be out of touch with the world, just three friends on a weekend adventure. Bill, John, and I had been camping together for years, and we considered ourselves seasoned pros. But this forest, it was different. Remote, untouched by the usual campers, promised a thrill we hadn't experienced before. We were all in for it. The drive took us hours away from civilization. As the city lights faded and the roads narrowed, an uneasy excitement brewed among us. We parked the car at the trailhead, shouldered our packs, and set off into the unknown. The air was thick with anticipation, and the canopy overhead quickly swallowed us into its embrace. From the start, forest felt off. It wasn't just the usual sounds of wildlife or the rustling of leaves. There was something beneath it all, an undercurrent of whispers and distant, unidentifiable noises. I glanced at Bill and John, trying to gauge if they felt it too, but their faces were masks of excitement. We trudged deeper, the path becoming less defined. The sunlight struggled to pierce through the dense foliage, casting eerie shadows that danced at the corners of our vision. John laughed off the atmosphere, but I noticed he kept closer to us than usual. Bill, ever the skeptic, shrugged off any talk of the supernatural. Just the wind, he'd say, or maybe some animals. But it wasn't just the wind, I felt it in my bones. Forest was alive, watching us, waiting. As dusk approached, we reached a clearing by a small stream and decided to set up camp. We were miles away from anyone, completely isolated. It should have been peaceful, but an uneasy silence settled over us as we worked. Even Bill, who never stopped talking, was uncharacteristically quiet. We sat around the fire that night, flames casting long, flickering shadows. We told stories, laughed, tried to shake off the feeling of being watched. But in the back of my mind, I knew something was wrong. The forest had secrets, and we were intruding. Little did we know, our weekend escape was about to become a nightmare we wouldn't wake up from. Morning came shrouded in a thick fog that seemed to mute the world around us. The usual morning chirps of birds were eerily absent, replaced by an oppressive silence. We packed up our gear and resumed our hike, pushing deeper into the forest. The trail was barely visible, a thin line cutting through the dense undergrowth. As we walked, the atmosphere grew heavier. The forest seemed to close in around us, trees leaning in as if to listen to our every breath. Bill, always the leader, pushed ahead with a determined stride. Even he seemed subdued. John stayed close behind me, his usual banter replaced by a tense silence. The deeper we went, the stranger things became. At first, it was just odd noises, a twig snapping here, a rustle there. But soon, the sounds turned unnatural. Low murmurs that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. I kept glancing over my shoulder, convinced we were being watched, but saw nothing. Then came the shadows. Fleeting glimpses of movement, just beyond the edge of our vision. Every time I turned to look, there was nothing but trees and darkness. John finally spoke up, his voice shaking. "Did you guys see that?" Bill brushed it off, trying to keep us calm. "Just your imagination, John. The mind plays tricks out here." But it wasn't our imagination. The shadows grew bolder, darting closer, lingering longer. The air turned colder, each breath a visible puff in the chilling gloom. We were miles away from any human presence, yet the feeling of being surrounded by something malevolent was undeniable. We reached an old wooden bridge spanning a narrow, mist-covered ravine. The bridge creaked ominously under our weight. Halfway across, the temperature plummeted. A dense, icy fog rolled in, and the sounds, the whispers, the rustling, grew louder, more insistent. Bill turned to us, a look of genuine fear in his eyes for the first time. "Keep moving and stay close." We tried to hurry, but then it happened. From the fog emerged a figure, translucent and shifting, like a mirage. It moved with unnatural speed, and before we could react, it seized Bill. He screamed, a sound that will haunt me forever, as it dragged him towards the edge of the bridge. John and I lunged to save him, but it was too late. The thing hurled Bill over the side with inhuman strength. His scream echoed, then abruptly stopped. We stood frozen, the reality of our situation sinking in. John wanted to go after him to search for Bill, but I knew it was futile. All we found were his clothes, far from the bridge, scattered as if by some cruel joke. The thing had taken him, and there was nothing we could do. The forest seemed to mock us with its silence. We were alone, and whatever had taken Bill was now after us. The shadows grew darker, the whispers louder. There was no turning back. We stood there, staring at the spot where Bill had disappeared. The forest around us seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, fog swirling and shifting like it was alive. I could feel John's breath, rapid and shallow, echoing my own fear. "We have to keep moving," I said, my voice barely a whisper. The forest felt like a predator, and we were its prey. Every second we lingered felt like an invitation for it to strike again. John nodded, his eyes wide with terror, but he followed me as we trudged deeper into the forest. Every step felt heavier, every shadow more sinister. The path was barely visible, thin thread through the encroaching darkness. The trees seemed to close in around us, their twisted branches reaching out like skeletal hands. We hadn't gone far when the whispers started again. Low, almost inaudible, like the forest itself was speaking to us. They were nonsensical, a jumble of words and sounds that made my skin crawl. John's grip on his flashlight tightened, the beam shaking as it cut through the mist. Then came the rustling. At first it was subtle, blending with the natural sounds of the forest. But soon it grew louder, more distinct. Something was moving through the trees, following us, stalking us. I glanced at John, his face pale, eyes darting around in panic. "Stay close," I urged, trying to keep my voice steady. "Whatever happens, we stick together." But the forest had other plans. Sudden, chilling wind swept through the trees, carrying with it the stench of decay. The fog thickened, and the shadows grew darker, more defined. We were not alone. A figure emerged from the mist, the same translucent entity that had taken Bill. It moved with an unnatural fluidity, its form shifting and flickering like a distorted reflection. John froze, his flashlight beam fixed on the creature, his breath hitching in his throat. The entity glided towards us, its presence suffocating. I grabbed John's arm, pulling him along as we stumbled through the undergrowth. The whispers grew louder, rustling more frantic. The thing was right behind us. We ran blindly, forest a blur of shadows and fear. The entity pursued us, its form constantly shifting, always just out of sight but never far behind. John was muttering to himself, his sanity fraying with each passing second. We reached a small clearing and stopped to catch our breath. The whispers and rustling had ceased, but the oppressive presence remained. John was trembling, his eyes wide with terror. I can't take it anymore," he stammered, his voice breaking. "It's in my head, it's everywhere." I tried to calm him, to make him focus. The forest's grip on his mind was too strong. The thing had done more than just chase us. It had broken John. He began to sob, his fear turning into hysteria. "We need to stay quiet," I whispered urgently. "It's drawn to sound, we have to be silent." But it was too late. John's fear had taken over. He bolted, screaming, his cries echoing through the forest. I reached out, trying to stop him, but he was already gone, swallowed by the darkness. The forest seemed to come alive with the sound of his screams. The entity followed, its form merging with the shadows, hunting its prey. I was alone, the oppressive silence closing in around me. My heart pounded in my chest as I stumbled through the undergrowth. The whispers returning, louder and more insistent. The forest was alive with malice, every shadow a potential threat. I had to find a way out, to survive the night in this cursed place. But deep down, I knew the forest wouldn't let me go so easily. The forest swallowed John's screams, leaving an unsettling silence in their wake. I was alone now, the oppressive darkness pressing in from all sides. Every step I took felt like a march deeper into the heart, some ancient, malevolent force. But I couldn't leave Bill behind. Despite the terror gripping my heart, I knew I had to find him, or at least find out what had become of him. I retraced my steps to the bridge, the fog still clinging to the air like a shroud. The cold had seeped into my bones, and every breath felt like inhaling ice. As I approached the spot where Bill had disappeared, the whispers returned, weaving through the trees like a sinister melody. Bill's clothes were scattered far from the bridge, a macabre breadcrumb trail leading me into the denser part of the forest. Fabric was torn and stained, as if ripped away in a violent struggle. My heart ached with a mix of fear and hope. If Bill was alive, he was out there somewhere, waiting for me to save him. I pushed deeper into the forest, the ground uneven and treacherous. The shadows danced around me, shifting and flickering in the corners of my vision. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, filling my mind with a cacophony of unintelligible voices. I stumbled over roots and fallen branches, my flashlight flickering in the suffocating darkness. Then I saw it, a faint, glowing light in the distance. My pulse quickened as I hurried towards it, the whispers growing more frenzied with every step. The light led me to a clearing where the translucent entity stood, its form shimmering in the dim light. It was holding something, or someone. "Bill!" I shouted, my voice breaking through the whispers. The entity turned towards me, its eyes, if they could be called that, fixing on me with an otherworldly intensity. It released Bill, who crumpled to the ground, motionless. I rushed to Bill's side, my hands trembling as I checked for a pulse. He was alive. Barely. His skin was cold, and his eyes stared vacantly at the sky. The entity hovered above us, its presence suffocating. I could feel its malevolence, its hunger. With a surge of desperation, I grabbed Bill and tried to drag him away from the clearing. The entity moved closer, its whispers now a deafening roar. I could feel its touch, icy and unnatural, sapping my strength. Bill moaned weakly, a sound that sent a jolt of fear and hope through me. "We need to go," I whispered, more to myself than to Bill. I hoisted him onto my shoulder, every muscle in my body protesting. Forest seemed to close in around us, the shadows growing darker, the whispers louder. The entity followed, its form shifting and flickering, always just out of reach but never far behind. We stumbled through the undergrowth, each step a battle against the forest's malevolent grip. Bill was barely conscious, his weight a constant reminder of the fragile line between life and death. The whispers seemed to mock us, promising doom with every breath. But I couldn't give up. Not yet. I had to get Bill out of this cursed forest. The entity's presence loomed behind us, a constant, chilling reminder of the nightmare we were trapped in. As we reached another clearing, Bill stirred, his eyes fluttering open. Where are we?" muttered, his voice weak and hoarse. "We're getting out of here," I replied, more determined than ever. "Just hold on a little longer." The forest around us seemed to pulse with anger, the shadows growing more aggressive, whispers more insistent. The entity was relentless, its pursuit a constant, inescapable terror. But I held on to a sliver of hope. If we could just make it through the night, if we could just find a way out of this damn forest, maybe, just maybe, we could survive. Bill's weight pressed heavily on my shoulder as we pushed forward. Each step felt like wading through molasses, the forest seemingly conspiring to slow our progress. The entity's presence was a constant, suffocating force, its whispers slithering into my mind, gnawing at my sanity. The path before us was barely discernible, a winding trail choked by gnarled roots and thick undergrowth. The trees loomed overhead, their branches twisting together like skeletal fingers, blocking out what little moonlight managed to penetrate the fog. Every rustle, every creak set my nerves on edge, my heart pounding in my chest like a war drum. I glanced back frequently, half expecting to see the translucent figure gliding through the mist. Each time I saw nothing but shadows and darkness, yet I knew it was there, lurking just beyond my vision. Bill groaned, a low, guttural sound that echoed through the oppressive silence. "We have to keep moving," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Stay with me, Bill." He nodded weakly, his eyes glassy and unfocused. The entity's attack had left him in a daze, his mind teetering on the edge of collapse. I could feel his fear, a palpable thing that mirrored my own. But we had to survive. We had to escape. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, as if the forest itself were trying to break us. They spoke of doom and despair, of inevitable death. I shook my head, trying to clear my thoughts, to focus on the path ahead. But the words lingered, festering in my mind like a poison. Then, without warning, Bill collapsed. He fell to the ground, his body convulsing, eyes rolling back in his head. Panic surged through me as I dropped to my knees beside him. Bill, stay with me." His eyes fluttered open, but they were empty, devoid of recognition. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices that seemed to emanate from his very being. The entity was close, too close. I could feel its icy breath on the back of my neck, its malevolent gaze boring into me. Desperation fueled my actions. I hoisted Bill back onto my shoulder, my muscles screaming in protest. The forest seemed to close in around us, the shadows growing thicker, the air colder. The whispers were deafening now, chorus of despair that threatened to overwhelm me. I stumbled forward, each step a monumental effort. The path twisted and turned, a labyrinthine maze that seemed designed to trap us. But I refused to give in. I clung to a fragile thread of hope, a belief that we could escape this nightmare. Suddenly, a flash of movement caught my eye. The entity emerged from the shadows, its form shifting and flickering like a ghost. It reached out, its translucent hand inches from Bill's face. A cold, inhuman rage filled me, and I lashed out with my free hand, swiping at the air in a futile attempt to drive it away. "Leave us alone," I screamed, my voice echoing through the forest. The entity hesitated, its form wavering, and for a brief moment, the whispers faltered. I seized the opportunity, pushing forward with renewed determination. The forest seemed to fight against me, its roots and branches snagging at my clothes, trying to drag me down. But I pressed on, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The entity pursued, its whispers now a low, menacing growl. We reached a small ravine, at its steep sides slick with moss and rainwater. There was no bridge, no easy way across. I glanced back, the entity hovering at the edge of the clearing, its eyes, if it had eyes, fixed on us. With a surge of adrenaline, I half-carried, half-dragged Bill down the ravine. The descent was treacherous, every step a potential disaster. The whispers followed us, growing fainter but no less ominous. We reached the bottom, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and decay. I looked up, the ravine walls towering above us. There was no going back. The only way out was forward. I took a deep breath, cold air burning my lungs, and began the climb. Each step was a battle, the wet rocks and mud threatening to pull us back down. But I refused to give up. The climb seemed to take hours, the weight of Bill and the oppressive fear slowing our progress. But eventually we reached the top. I collapsed onto the ground, gasping for breath. Bill lay beside me, his eyes closed, breathing shallow. The whispers were faint now, a distant echo. The entity was nowhere in sight. For the first time since we'd entered the forest, I felt a glimmer of hope. We weren't out yet, but we'd made it this far. "Hang in there, Bill," I whispered, my voice hoarse. "We're getting out of here, I promise." The reprieve was brief. As I lay there, catching my breath, the oppressive silence of the forest began to creep back in. The whispers, once faint, started to grow louder again, seeping into the edges of my consciousness. I pulled Bill to his feet, his body limp and unresponsive, and forced myself to move forward. There was no time to rest, the entity was still out there, waiting. The path ahead was shrouded in darkness, the trees twisting into grotesque shapes that seemed to mock our every step. John's absence weighed heavily on me. I hadn't seen him since he ran off, his screams echoing in my mind. I feared the worst, but a part of me clung to the hope that he was still alive, somewhere in this cursed forest. Bill mumbled incoherently, his words a jumble of fear and confusion. The entity's attack had shattered his mind, leaving him a shell of the friend I once knew. I tightened my grip on him, my determination hardening. I wouldn't lose him too. The forest seemed to sense my resolve. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, filling the air with their sinister chorus. Shadows danced at the corners of my vision, and the cold, oppressive presence of the entity felt closer than ever. It was as if the forest itself was alive, conspiring to break us. As we stumbled through the undergrowth, I caught sight of a familiar figure in the distance. It was John, standing at the edge of a clearing, his back to us. Relief washed over me, and I called out to him, "John, thank God you're alive." He didn't respond. I hurried towards him, dragging Bill along. But as I got closer, I realized something was terribly wrong. John's posture was stiff, unnatural. His head tilted to one side, and his eyes were wide and unseeing, filled with an unnatural, otherworldly light. "John?" I whispered, reaching out to touch his shoulder. His skin was cold, clammy, and he didn't react to my touch. The whispers grew deafening, a cacophony of voices that seemed to emanate from him. Suddenly, John turned to face me, his movements jerky and unnatural. His mouth opened, but the words that came out were not his own. "You should not have come here." I stumbled back, fear gripping my heart. John's eyes were empty, void of the friend I once knew. The entity had taken him, twisted him into something unrecognizable. Bill whimpered beside me, his fear mirroring my own. "We need to go," I whispered, more to myself than to Bill. I backed away slowly, my eyes never leaving John's empty gaze. Forest seemed to close in around us, the shadows growing thicker, the whispers louder. John took a step forward, his movements stiff and unnatural. "You cannot escape," he said, his voice a haunting echo of the whispers. "Forest will consume you." Panic surged through me, and I turned, pulling Bill along as I ran. John's voice followed us, a chilling reminder of the entity's power. The forest seemed to twist and warp around us, the path ahead a maze of darkness and fear. Bill's weight dragged me down, his body a constant reminder of our peril. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, filling my mind with their sinister chant. I stumbled over roots and fallen branches, my breath coming in ragged gasps. We reached another clearing, and I collapsed onto the ground, exhausted. Bill lay beside me, his eyes closed, breathing shallow. The whispers were deafening now, a chorus of despair that threatened to overwhelm me. But I couldn't give up, not yet. I had to find a way out to survive this nightmare. The forest's grip on us was tightening, but I refused to let it win. "Stay with me, Bill," I whispered, my voice shaking. "We're going to make it, I promise." The forest around us seemed to pulse with anger, the shadows growing more aggressive, the whispers more insistent. The entity was relentless, its pursuit a constant, inescapable terror. But I held on to that fragile thread of hope, determined to find a way out of this cursed place. We had to survive. We had to escape. We pressed on, the forest around us a labyrinth of shadows and whispers. Each step felt like a journey into the heart of darkness, the trees twisting into grotesque shapes that seemed to leer at us with malevolent intent. Bill was barely conscious, his weight dragging on my shoulder like a dead weight. The entity's presence was ever looming, constant reminder of the nightmare we were trapped in. As we moved deeper into the forest, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. They were no longer just background noise. They were voices, clear and haunting, speaking directly to me. "You will never leave," they hissed. "This forest is your tomb." I tried to block them out, focusing on the path ahead, but the voices were relentless. They spoke of doom and despair, of inevitable death. They seemed to know my deepest fears, exploiting them with cruel precision. I felt my grip on reality slipping, the line between nightmare and reality blurring. Bill stirred, his eyes flickering open for a moment. He looked at me, and I saw a flicker of recognition, a glimmer of the friend I once knew. "Help me," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the cacophony of whispers. "I'm trying, Bill," I replied, my voice cracking with desperation. "Just hold on a little longer." The forest seemed to close in around us, the trees leaning in as if to listen to our every word. The air was thick with the stench of decay, a nauseating reminder of the malevolent force that haunted us. Every step was a struggle, the ground uneven and treacherous. We stumbled upon a small stream, its water black and murky. The whispers grew louder, more frenzied, as if the forest was trying to drown us in its madness. I knelt by the stream, splashing the cold water on my face in a desperate attempt to clear my mind. Bill collapsed beside me, his breathing shallow and labored. As I looked into the water, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Reflected in the dark surface was not just my face, but the face of the entity, its eyes glowing with an eerie light. It was right behind me, its presence a suffocating weight on my shoulders. I spun around, but there was nothing there. The whispers laughed, a mocking, sinister sound that echoed through the trees. I felt a surge of panic, my heart pounding in my chest like a drum. We were being hunted, toyed with by a malevolent force that thrived on our fear. I grabbed Bill, pulling him to his feet. "We need to keep moving," I said, my voice trembling. "We can't stay here." We continued our journey, the forest growing darker and more oppressive with each step. The whispers were a constant companion, their sinister words gnawing at my sanity. I could feel the entity's presence, always just out of sight, always watching. We reached a small cave, its entrance hidden by thick undergrowth. It offered a temporary respite from the relentless pursuit, a place to catch our breath. I led Bill inside, the darkness swallowing us whole. The air was damp and cold, the walls slick with moisture. I collapsed onto the ground, my body aching with exhaustion. Bill lay beside me, his breathing ragged and uneven. The whispers were faint here, a distant echo that still gnawed at my mind. I closed my eyes, trying to find a moment of peace, but the forest's grip on me was too strong. I drifted in and out of consciousness, my dreams a twisted reflection of our nightmare. I saw Bill's face, twisted in agony, John's empty eyes, entity's glowing gaze. Forest was alive, a malevolent force that fed on our fear and despair. When I awoke, the cave was still shrouded in darkness. Bill was stirring, his eyes fluttering open. He looked at me, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of hope. "We're gonna get out of here," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I promise." But even as I spoke the words, I felt the weight of the forest's malevolence pressing down on me. The entity was still out there, still hunting us. The whispers were a constant reminder of our doom. We had to keep moving. We had to find a way out of this cursed place. But with each passing moment, the forest's grip tightened, its whispers growing louder, more insistent. We were running out of time, and I could feel my sanity slipping away. I helped Bill to his feet, my resolve hardening. We had to survive. We had to escape. Forest would not claim us. Not yet. The forest seemed to pulse with malevolent energy as we emerged from the cave, the whispers a constant, insidious presence in the back of my mind. Bill leaned heavily on me, his strength waning with each passing moment. The path ahead was obscured by dense fog, trees looming like sentinels of doom. The air was thick with the scent of decay, a reminder of the malevolent force that stalked us. We pressed on, each step a monumental effort. The forest twisted and turned around us, the path a labyrinthine nightmare. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, filling my mind with their sinister chant. "You will never leave," they taunted. "This forest is your grave." I shook my head, trying to clear my thoughts, to focus on the task at hand. But the whispers were relentless, their words burrowing into my mind like worms. Bill's breathing was ragged, his body trembling with exhaustion. Tightened my grip on him, determined to keep him moving. As we stumbled through the undergrowth, I caught sight of a glimmer of light in the distance. Hope surged through me, a fragile flame in the darkness. "Bill, look," I said, my voice trembling. "There's a way out." But even as I spoke the words, the whispers grew frenzied, a cacophony of voices that seemed to mock our hope. The light flickered as if struggling to pierce the oppressive darkness. The entity's presence was suffocating, its malevolence palpable. We reached the edge of the clearing, and I saw the source of the light, a small, flickering campfire, surrounded by the remains of what once might have been a campsite. My heart sank as I realized the truth. This was not a way out. It was a trap. The whispers reached a crescendo, a deafening roar that filled my mind with despair. The entity emerged from the shadows, its form shifting and flickering in the dim light. It was closer than ever, its translucent body shimmering with an unnatural glow. Bill collapsed beside the campfire, his body convulsing. I dropped to my knees, my hands trembling as I tried to revive him. "Bill, stay with me," I pleaded, my voice cracking with desperation. But his eyes were empty, mine shattered by the entity's assault. The entity hovered above us, its presence a suffocating weight. The whispers were deafening now, a relentless chant of doom. "You cannot escape," they hissed. "You are ours." I looked up at the entity, my fear giving way to a cold, desperate rage. "Leave us alone," I screamed, my voice echoing through the clearing. But the entity did not waver. Reached out, its translucent hand inches from Bill's face. Desperation fueled my actions. I grabbed a burning branch from the campfire, swinging it wildly at the entity. The flames flickered and danced, casting eerie shadows on the trees. The entity recoiled, its form wavering, and for a moment, the whispers faltered. But it was a fleeting victory. The entity reformed, its malevolence undiminished. It lashed out, its touch icy and unnatural. Pain surged through me, and I fell to the ground, my vision blurring. As the darkness closed in, I heard Bill's voice, a faint whisper in the cacophony. "Thank you," he said, his voice filled with a strange, haunting clarity. "For trying." The entity's grip tightened and I felt my strength slipping away. The whispers grew louder, a final triumphant chorus. The forest around us seemed to close in, the shadows growing darker, the air colder. In my last moments, I saw Bill's face, a flicker of peace in his eyes. The entity's touch was all-consuming, a cold embrace that sapped my will to fight. The whispers were deafening now, a relentless chant that promised oblivion. As the darkness swallowed me whole, I realized the truth. We were never meant to escape. The forest had claimed us, its malevolent force too powerful to overcome. Bill and John were gone, and soon I would join them. In the end, the forest won. The whispers were right. This was our grave. And in that final tragic moment, I understood the true horror of our fate. We were lost, forever trapped in the malevolent embrace of the forest. And there was no escape. As the darkness threatened to engulf me completely, a new sound cut through the cacophony of whispers. A low, resonant voice that carried an inexplicable sense of calm and authority. "Hold on," commanded, the words slicing through the oppressive upward. I forced my eyes open, struggling to focus. There, standing at the edge of the clearing, was a figure cloaked in light, an ethereal glow surrounding him. He moved with a confidence and purpose that seemed out of place in this nightmarish forest. I felt a surge of relief mingled with disbelief. Was this a savior, or just another cruel trick of the forest? The entity recoiled, its form wavering in the presence of the new arrival. The whispers faltered, their once deafening roar reduced to a confused murmur. The figure approached, and as he drew closer, I saw that he was not just a hallucination. His eyes, sharp and piercing, met mine with a look of determination. "Can you stand?" he asked, his voice steady and reassuring. I nodded weakly, summoning the last of my strength. The stranger helped me to my feet, his grip firm and steady. He cast a wary glance at the entity, which seemed to be retreating into the shadows, its malevolence held at bay by his presence. Who are you?" I managed to ask, my voice barely a whisper. "A guide," replied simply. "I'm here to get you out." He led me away from the clearing, the path ahead illuminated by his ethereal glow. Forest, which had seemed so impenetrable moments before, now parted before us, the shadows retreating in his wake. The whispers grew fainter, their sinister chorus replaced by a blessed silence. We walked for what felt like hours, though it could have been minutes. Time had lost all meaning in this cursed place. The guide's presence was a comforting anchor, a reminder that there was still hope. My thoughts turned to Bill and John, and a pang of sorrow pierced my heart. They were gone, lost to the malevolent force that haunted the forest. But I had to survive, for them and for myself. Trees began to thin, and the oppressive darkness lifted slightly. I saw the faint outline of a path, first real sign of an exit. The guide stopped, turning to face me. "This is where I leave you," he said, his expression solemn. "Follow this path, and you'll find your way out." "Thank you," I said, my voice choked with emotion. "I don't know how to repay you." He shook his head. "No need. Just remember what you've seen here, and tell others. Forest feeds on silence and fear. Knowledge is your weapon against it." With that, he turned and walked back into the forest, his form gradually fading until he was nothing more than a distant glow, and then nothing. I stood there for a moment, staring after him, before turning to face the path ahead. The journey out of the forest was a blur, my mind numb with exhaustion and grief. The whispers had ceased, the shadows retreating, but the memory of their malevolence lingered. Finally, I stumbled out of the forest, the sunlight blinding after the perpetual twilight of the trees. Collapsed onto the ground, the weight of my ordeal crashing down on me. Tears streamed down my face as I remembered Bill and John, their faces etched in my mind. I had survived, the cost had been unimaginable. In the days that followed, I recounted my story to anyone who would listen. The authorities launched a search but found no trace of Bill or John, nor any sign of the entity that had haunted us. The forest remained a place of mystery and fear, malevolence lurking just beyond the edges of human understanding. I knew I would never be the same. Forest had taken something from me, piece of my soul that I would never get back. But I had survived, and as the guide had told me, I would remember, and I would tell others. If you liked this real and horrifying story, leave your like and subscribe to the channel. Check out this other real horror story appearing in the video. Thanks for watching.